Today's episode is brought to you by Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain, it's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you. It can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more podcast platforms. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started right now.
Unforbidden Truth.
I'm Andrew and welcome to Unforbidden Truth. On this episode, I'll be talking to Maggie Deming, the daughter of serial killer Arthur Shawcross, the Genesee River killer. For those who haven't heard of Arthur Shawcross, here's a bit of a summary. Arthur Shawcross remains, to this day, one of America's most notorious serial killers. Arthur Shawcross's first confirmed murders stem from 1972. Shawcross raped and murdered two children, Jack Blake, 10 years old, and Karen Hill, 8 years old. Shawcross was arrested for both murders. Shawcross served 14 years of that 25-year sentence. Not too long after his release from prison, Shawcross would go on to murder 11 prostitutes in or around Rochester, New York. Shawcross was charged and convicted of the 11 murders, with a 12th murder not officially charged to him. Shawcross made claims about cannibalism, even slicing out and eating the vulva of 3 of his victims, but refused to talk about his earlier claims of eating the genitals of his first victim, 10-year-old Jack Blake, who he raped and murdered. Arthur Shawcross was sentenced to 250 years in prison for 11 murders, and he passed away in 2008 after he complained about leg pains. He was taken to Albany Medical Center where he went into cardiac arrest and later died that night. So Maggie didn't find out who her father was until she was 31 years old. Maggie remained close with her dad, Arthur Shawcross, up until his death in 2008. I'll be speaking with Maggie about her relationship with Shawcross, what he was like around her and her children. There's one particular story that gave me goosebumps, a conversation that he had with his grandson. So without further ado, here's my interview with Maggie Deming, the daughter of Genesee River killer Arthur Shawcross. I'm here with Maggie Deming now, the daughter of Arthur Shawcross. How are you doing today, Maggie?
Pretty good.
Good. So I want to jump on into it, and I want you to explain a little bit about yourself and who your father is and how you came to find out that your father is one of America's most infamous serial killers.
Okay. I was born in Brooklyn, 1969, and my mother had met Arthur Shawcross in Hawaii a previous year before, and I did not find out about his existence until I was about 31 years old.
When you found out, did you exactly know who Arthur Shawcross was?
No, I had to look him up because, like, when she told me, it was confusing at first because the man who had raised me, thought was my father, had passed away 2 months prior. And then she hit me with this kind of news. So it kind of like broadsided me in a way. So I kind of like looked him up and, one thing led to another. And then I found his address and I started to write to him. And, it was back and forth, back and forth. I didn't see him right away, but I did see him like maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5 months after. It was like gnawing at me. I had to like reach out to this because if there's somebody out there connected to you, you have to like kind of like bridge the gap. So, you reach out. And at first I didn't expect anything, but I got a letter soon after, like 2 weeks prior. After that, 2 weeks after that, I had gotten a letter from him. And it was pretty startling. He was very cordial, yes, I know who you are. And, but he didn't know where I was. I mean, he knew, he didn't keep tabs over me over the years. So, it was pretty much out of touch.
Did he know that you were his daughter before you had wrote him?
I believe my mother had contacted him and told him, and that's how it happened. So he kind of knew of my existence.
The first few letters or phone calls, whatever it have you, what did you guys talk about for the most part?
Getting to like know each other. He would give us a background information. I told him about how many kids I had. I had 7 at the time, and I named each one of them, and then I told him who was in school, who wasn't in school. And I told him who I was married to and how many years I was married. It was like basically cordial stuff, catching up and all that. But I mean, as far as he was concerned, he was pretty, his letters were very pleasant, nothing over the top or anything. Then he had invited me. I think I went 6 months after the fact. I went up to see him and I took my daughter with me. And my daughter was like, she was kind of nervous and everything, but, I wasn't nervous. He walked in. We thought he was going to be behind the glass because they had the boots over there with the glass, with the telephones to it. But he wasn't considered like dangerous or violent, so he was able to have a one-to-one. But there was a guard right behind us. So it was like, it was kind of like awkward in a way because it was somebody there that was looking at us. So we had to keep our distance and stuff. But, I seen him when he walked in. He was bigger than life. He was larger than life. And he sat down. He said hello to me. He said hello to my daughter. And I said, hello, Dad. And basically everything opened up from there. He was talking about, oh, how was your trip up here? Oh, do you like it up here? It's pretty up here. I was like, yeah, it's nice and everything, considering you're going to a prison, it's kind of hard to say, yeah, it's nice coming up to a prison, but I mean, the landscape is fine, we've seen a couple of dead deer on the road, but that's all right too. It was very pleasant. It was a 4-hour visit, and and he says, I hope you come back to see me soon. And then I was a little bit more intrigued by it that I came by to see him the next month. I wrote him, and we basically communicated by letter. He never called me or anything because he could have called me if he wanted to, but he didn't want to like boogie in on my life with the kids and my husband. My husband was kind of like hesitant, like, don't go up there, leave it alone. And I was like, well, I can't, I had to pursue it. And then I took my oldest son. I never took my younger kids. I mean, a lot of people have that misconception that I let my younger kids know about him and stuff. I mean, I would send them school papers. The kids would send him school papers. I would send them school pictures, and he would draw their pictures, and he would send it to them. And, he would send birthday cards, Christmas cards, all kinds of things. And, he was like a grandfatherly type guy.
When did your father start getting comfortable with you enough to talk about his life and all the crimes he had committed?
Yeah, that took a while. I mean, that took at least 2 to 4 years for him to open up because, it's kind of like hard to like segue into that kind of conversation without erupting something like the beast. But a lot of people that went up there to visit him were always trying to pick his brain. Where I didn't go in there with an agenda. I didn't go in there with any kind of like, any sideline like, oh yeah, well, you got to tell me this and that. I'm going to write a tell-all book. I wasn't about that. Whatever he said to me in confidence, I kept in confidence. I never told anybody anything. I never really told my husband about anything because, that was between me and him. And I had to keep that loyalty between us. But when he started to open up, it was very gradual. And he would get like really, really deathly quiet. He would not like elaborate. So I didn't want to push him at first. But then later on, when like 4 years goes in now, I started to like, a little nudge here and there. And he would get upset. But like in the 8 years that we've been in contact, we never had one bad word against each other. We never left a visit, like in bad terms. We never left, letters in bad terms or anything like that. He never chastised me. I never chastised him. But when he got into speaking about his crimes, he basically started from the time he was a kid.
Did he talk about any of the abuse he suffered as a child in depth more than what is known, whether it came from his trial or his own words throughout time?
I mean, I was raped when I was 14. So as a rape victim, I can basically sympathize with the fact, and like there was no bullshit there, that he was basically telling me the truth. I mean, whether or not he elaborated or he embellished, the story like that, that's up to debate. But I mean, looking at him and the way he spoke to, and he actually broke down a couple of times, which I never thought he would. That was like very uncomfortable for me because I made a grown man cry. Anything he told me was straightforward, was very straightforward. When he had passed away, I had gotten all the court transcripts. I read everything that wasn't on public record. And everything that was in that court transcript, he basically told me face to face. So, I mean, I didn't think it was any bullshit or anything like that. I mean, according to him, he was basically it started with his sister. Sister was older than him. And, they were, how kids are, they play around and, they're curious and stuff like that. So, you show me yours, I'll show you mine. That's how it started. And then, I mean, as far as penetration was concerned, he didn't penetrate her, penally or anything like that. I mean, he may have used his fingers and she used her fingers on him. And then it went to the aunt. The aunt was like, having him basically, use oral sex on her. and you oral sex on him. And then his mother was the same thing, was like oral sex on her, oral sex on him. And then the sister, it just basically escalated to the sister, with the oral sex back and forth and everything. Then, it was like, he thought it was normal. He thought it was normal that, oh, they're showing me affection. He kind of equated that as affection, and they teased him when he was growing up. They said he was an oddball. He was this, he was that. Then he was doing weird things with animals. And, he was like, dabbling with the bestiality and stuff like that. And then he was setting fires, and he was getting into all kinds of trouble as a kid.
Right. Every single warning sign as a child that you're going to become a serial killer.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I mean, if there was any red flags, there was like alarm bells going off left, right, and center. And at that time, they didn't have the services they have nowadays, which is sad. So, I mean, if he had suffered any kind of like TBI or anything like that, he did suffer a TBI when he was in high school. He got hit in the head with a discus. And, with traumatic brain injury, that can also catapult, weird behavior, that could either make you regress or make you aggressive. It kind of flows both ways. With him, he kind of regressed. He was like I said, a lot of people called him an oddball. He was very immature. A lot of people, picked on him in school. The teachers picked on him. His family picked on him. Friends picked on him. So he didn't know what was normal. He thought that was all normal. Oh, yeah, I'm getting picked on. They must like me. He was like starved for attention. This guy was starved for attention. He was starved for affection. Nobody really gave him a hug or anything. It's that old thing. Oh, my mother did it. Blame my mother. But he was abused all around. Like everybody. So that kind of like put the seed of contention in him where, he just busted out years later on. And like I said, for the life of me, I don't know why, he was with my mother for like a half a year and he didn't kill her. I mean, I don't understand. Was she one of the victims that got away? I mean, that really boggles my mind.
Has your mother ever spoke about her relationship with him, or if he ever was abusive towards her or anything like that?
No, she may have said one or two things in passing after the fact. And she said that he was very cordial. He was very polite. He was very respectful. He never mistreated her in any which way. He was a gentleman. He was a true gentleman, and I just don't understand where all the deviant behavior, where all his other partners that he was with, like Rose and the rest of them, he was abusive to them. But that was before my mother and after my mother. So in between that time, he kind of settled to the fact that he had some kind of happiness with her for some reason. He had some kind of. I mean, he has other kids. I don't even know who they are, but I know he has other kids, and I'm pretty sure my mother knew about it. But for some reason, I was like the only one that was vocal out of the whole thing. Because nobody really reached out to them. They couldn't find him, or they changed their name because they wanted nothing to do with him. I never took the name of Shawcross because I'm a married woman. I have my husband's name, so I never really took the name.
Did you ever feel uncomfortable when you were visiting your father?
Not at all. Only I felt uncomfortable when he was basically telling me about the crimes with the kids, because at that time my kids were about the same age those kids were when they died, and it kind of hit me hard because as a mother, you protect your kids with all and every ounce of strength you have. And, I just couldn't put the two together. I really couldn't comprehend the two of them together. I couldn't connect them two, because I know he would never hurt my kids, even if he did meet them. But the fact of the matter is he did commit the ultimate sin that you can, is killing a child. To me, that is the most, unforgivable thing you could. But you know what? It's not for me to forgive him. It's God to forgive him. I'm not a holy roller. I do pray. I'm a Catholic, but I don't go to church because I don't feel that I need to go to church to worship anybody. But the fact of the matter is, that's not for me to forgive him. He was able to open up to me and tell me before he died that, what he did to these kids. And it really, it unnerved me. Yes, that was like the most uncomfortable thing I had to ever sit through. After that, I kind of disassociated it. And, I kind of when he started talking about the murders with the women, I was more stronger at that point, mentally and physically, to listen to what he had to say. When I came out of that prison, it was like I got hit with a sledgehammer. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. You can't really do that when you're getting on a bus to get on, to go back to the city. You can't scream and why is she screaming and stuff I held it in until I got home. It let out. I was crying. I was not screaming, but I was crying for these women. Then I kind of held back. I didn't visit him for 1 month because I kind of had to digest it. to really take it in. Should I really go back and pursue it? But then at that point, I was really too stuck in. I could not break the connection with him, so I had to pursue it more. So I asked him, I said, I'm sorry, I had things going in my house. I was going to school at the time, so, he kind of forgave me for that. So, I mean, it was no big deal, but I still wrote to him. I kept that line of communication open.
When your father spoke to you about his crimes, did he seem uneasy or perhaps a little overstimulated?
None at all. He became very vacant. His staring, his breathing, everything was very vacant. It was like he was talking mechanical. It was mechanical. I think maybe it was like a delayed shock on his part. I mean, so many years later, you think. And, I think he didn't want to really get into that really deeply until, later on, it started opening up, little by little it started opening up. He would talk about one murder and then he'll jump back to the kid. Then he'll go talk about another kid. I was like, oh God, I was like a ping pong. I was like a ping pong in my head. And I was like, he's jumping from one murder to the other. Every time he talked about a murder, I felt that I was responsible. I felt because he was telling me this and, anybody else he told to, I don't know if they felt, but every murder that he committed, I felt responsible for. I kind of took in that guilt and his guilt. And I would never, they say, oh, you got the same bloodline as him. Oh, your blood runs through his veins. I would never hurt a child or another human being, in case of self-defense, yes, absolutely. But when it comes to like hurting people, no, I don't think I could. I don't think that would ever pass in my mind.
In April of 1967, at the age of 21 years old, your father was drafted by the Army and he served on one tour, I believe it was in Vietnam, and he never did see combat himself. Even though he never did see combat, he had some very wild tales about cannibalism, murder. Did he go into depth about any of this with you?
Yes, that would be his first murders. Those would be his first ever murders that he actually accomplished and attempted. He would pick up prostitutes. There was tons of prostitutes at that time. And they were faceless people. Nobody knew them. Nobody cared about them. They had no family, no connections to nobody. So if you killed one, it wouldn't make any difference. Just dump her in. That's it. He met a prostitute. The first prostitute he met when he first came there. He took her to a hotel. He did, they did the deed and everything. They did the nasty. And then after that, he strangled her. He strangled her and he cut her up. He didn't engage in cannibalism that time because, like I said, that was his first kill. He said he felt violently sick. And I figured that was normal. He would feel violently sick. But after that, he didn't feel violently sick after that. It was a cooling off period, for like a couple of weeks. And then he went out to the jungle and then he came across the two girls in the jungle, and they were cleaning themselves in some kind of like a stream or something. And he captured them. He tied them up. He was cutting one girl and eating her flesh, and there was another girl peeing down her leg while she was watching this, and she was screaming. I mean, he killed both of them. He strangled them, and then he killed them. Then he basically eviscerated them. That's when he had the taste of human flesh. I guess with everything going on around him, being in the jungle and it's a war and everything, he got a taste of human flesh. It was a frenzy, one of those frenzy things. And when I spoke to him about it, I said, how did you feel? He said he felt alive. For some reason, he always concentrated on the vaginal area because he always felt that was an opening to life. I don't know why. He just said that the vagina was an opening to life, considering the fact that he had to perform oral sex on his family members. So, it kind of like connects in a way. He was trying to kill his mother, try to kill his aunt, try to kill his sister by killing these women. So basically, he killed them. He cut out their vagina. He ate it. And basically that was his I think that was his way of closure. That was a wrong way of closure, really. I mean, there's ways of dealing with closure. But at that time, they didn't have, like I said, they didn't have the facilities they had to, these days. And it was out there in the jungle. So who's going to care? We're in wartime. We're going to kill indiscriminately. Anybody, civilians, whoever.
Did he happen to tell you how many women he did kill in Vietnam?
I would say would be close to 10 women at that time. Well, that could be a little bit exaggerated, because like I said, I mean, according to what he said, it was basically 10, and he didn't go any further than that because he ended up getting shipped back to the States.
Right. So, yeah, he would have for sure kept killing over there, hadn't he?
Right.
ended his
That's when he
tour.
ended up in Hawaii. Right. After he did his tour, he came to Hawaii, and at the time, that's when he met my mother. So there was no killing in between that time until the 1970s. Like, they were only together for a few months. She went back to New York, and he went back to wherever he was going. And he was married at the time. He was married. My mother was married at the time. So, there was like a separation between the both of their spouses and everything. That's how they got together. So, they kept in touch, but not like, every day, calling up, writing. No, I mean, they kept in touch sporadically.
So shortly after getting back from Vietnam, and then it sounds like after leaving Hawaii, your dad ended up moving back to New York, and he began committing, I guess, what you could call petty crimes, which landed him a 5-year prison sentence. And he was granted early release after serving just 22 months, and part of him saving a correctional officer's life during a prison riot, ironically enough.
Yeah, that was in Greenhaven, yes.
And then shortly after he was released from prison on May 7th, 1972, that's when your dad raped and killed 10-year-old Jack Blake. That's his first known confirmed victim. He lured Jack into the woods days prior to the discovery of his body. 8-year-old Karen Hill was raped and murdered as well, and her body was found shortly after. So those were your father's first 2 confirmed murders.
In America.
So your father was convicted for manslaughter on both deaths, and he got a maximum sentence of 25 years. And frankly, I think the state of New York fucked up at that point in time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I would say so. I mean, I would have gave him life, to be honest with you. I know that's, it's a
life on both counts.
Life on both counts. There's a kid, there's a kid involved. There's a murder, especially a rape. I mean, that's like you're going beyond the beyond. I mean, that's like breaking the holy of holies. So, I mean, that's something that, you would have to do life for. I mean, sorry, but if there was an electric chair at that time, I would have had him in an electric chair. I'm sorry to say it.
After 14 years for the rape murder of these 2 young children, your father's released, and after he's released, he has a hard time not only with work, but being that the nature of his crimes, people not forgetting what happened, I guess harassing him, one could say.
Because they didn't have that, child sex offender law at the time. That was basically open to contention at the time. They didn't even have that. So when he was going from town to town and going to jobs and losing jobs, and then people would find out, and he would go from another town to town. And at the time he was with Rose. Rose was older than him, and, she kind of like stuck with him in a way because, considering the fact she was older and she wasn't not very nice looking, she took care of him, and, I mean, he cheated on her. I can't say that he was 100%, faithful to anybody, but, he cheated on her with prostitutes and stuff like that. And like I said, he used to ride a bicycle. He used to ride a kid's bicycle. And a lot of people, I mean, that'll take you, that's like red flags right there. Somebody's riding around with a kid's bicycle. That's kind of weird. So, I mean, that's how they kind of like pegged it. They kind of said, oh, well, he's riding around the bicycle and he's kind of weird and stuff like that. And he says weird things. So then they, people start to take notice, and then they say, oh, this is the guy that did this, did this 14 years ago, da-da-da. Get him out of town. Get him. And they kept running him out of town. Then he went to Rochester, where the Genesee River was.
Did he ever confide in you how long he was patronizing prostitutes?
Yeah, for some time. When he came back to New York State, I mean, I think he was like dabbling at the time, dabbling in and out of prostitution with them. Then there was a rumor that he had gotten AIDS from one prostitute, and that's why he was killing that. And he was motivated. That was a complete fallacy. That's a rumor. He never went out with anybody who had an STD or anything like that. I mean, basically, he knew these girls. They knew him. And some of them were street smart. They wouldn't take shit from nobody. They'll cut you without even with no reservation. But he knew that, and they thought, oh, he's harmless and stuff like that. He's a father type. He'd give me a couple dollars if I needed it, if I seen him on the street, and we don't have to pull a trick on him, whatever. And he was very giving. He was very giving. But then for some reason, the homicidal urges kind of like they popped up in him, and he's like, oh, I'm going to start doing it again. He said, he just got in one of these funks where, I laid low, I was run out of town, I was humiliated, and this and this and this. Now I'm finding it more comfortable. He was like basically camping out, feeling comfortable in his surroundings. Maybe he'll blend in, nobody would notice anything. And the cops didn't notice it. He was going to the same Dunkin' Donuts when these guys were going, and he was listening to what they were saying about this case. And he was like talking to them. They would never think. They would never think that this guy here, he's just he's a weird guy, whatever, like that. He sits in here and drinks coffee or whatever, like he talks to everybody. He works at the sandwich factory. You wouldn't put two and two together at the time. Now you would put that to, somebody's weird. Somebody's making cheese sandwiches like Tom Green did, and Freddie got fingered. Yeah, you would say, okay, the guy's an oddball. I'm gonna go check this guy out. He's a weirdo. He just went under the radar. He was under the radar.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember seeing anything in the news about the murders or your father's arrest at the time when you didn't know who he was?
Never. I never even heard the man's name before at all. I never, I really didn't. I really wasn't up to date with current events and stuff like that, because I was raising kids at the time, and I really didn't have time to sit down and watch the news or read the newspaper or listen to anything. So I really had no knowledge of it whatsoever.
Were you living in New York at the time?
Oh, I was living in Brooklyn, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. That's so wild because I'm sure it was everywhere in the newspaper.
Oh, yeah.
News, not only national or internationally covered, but New York probably had to be insane with coverage.
Big time. I mean, big time because, like I said, New York is like the hub of everything. But I never was, in the know at the time because, like I said, I had kids. I had young kids at the time. And I was just newly married, so, where do you have the time to sit down and read a newspaper or, watch the news? Because you're running after kids all day, So I wasn't really much of a news person, so to speak, so I really didn't hear nothing about it. Nothing at all. I didn't even, like I said, I never even read the newspaper at that time.
What all has your father told you in detail in which that has stuck with you or somehow has impacted you, whether in a positive or negative way, whether it be about positive memories in his life or something particular about a victim or victims?
I believe it was with June, one of his victims, June. She was kind of like mentally slow. And I had a brother that was mentally slow. So when he was telling me about how he killed her, it was like, she wasn't a prostitute, number one. She was a friend of his wife. And he kind of took advantage of the fact that she was mentally slow. And she kind of equated that as affection, but she got scared. And I'm going to tell. That's all you have to do is say that to my father. It was like, I'm going to tell, and he'll snap your neck. And which in case he did. He choked her. He choked her, and he cut her vagina out. And he was sitting in a field eating it right next to her body. Basically, every time he killed somebody, most people in their right mind would run. You just killed somebody. You're not going to get caught. You're going to run. He would sit there with them. While they, after they died. And I said, then I said to him, did you ever have sex with the corpse? He said, no, I never did that. So there was never any, semen on the bodies or whatsoever. But the fact of the matter is he was sitting next to them. He was stroking their hair. He was talking to them. That's pretty bizarre. And then after a while, he just went back home. Like it was like another night. I was working. I was doing that. I was driving around. And his wife never suspected it. He never told her. There was no blood on him or anything like that. I'm pretty sure he had a change of clothes in his, his car at the time, And his wife was like I said, she was older than him. She was probably in bed before he was. And, she was like very oblivious to everything he was doing. And she didn't even believe that he killed kids. That's the whole thing about it. Considering the fact that this was big news back then, in the papers, because when I went back and read it, years later on when I'd gotten a book, somebody had sent me a book about him. I think it was Jack Olson or something. And I read the whole book. His wife was oblivious to us because when I had asked him about him, I said, did Rose know anything? He says, no, she was oblivious to it. She didn't even believe me that I was in, she knew I was in prison, but she thought it was like, Penny Annie stuff and stuff like that. I said, yeah, but, seriously, you killed 2 kids. He was in jail for a long time. Doesn't she, was she stewed out or something? I don't know. Because, to me, I would ask questions. Why are you in prison for? I'm married to you. I'd like to know why you're in prison. I'm going to be sleeping next to you every night. I'm going to be living with you. I want to know that you're not going to snap my neck when I'm not looking, These are the kind of questions that kind of keep me out of the good schools. But, by logic reasons, she was, totally oblivious to everything. I'm not trying to talk down about the woman. The woman's dead now. But how could you be oblivious to that? Now, Clara, his last wife, that was another story. She knew all about it. She was cool with it. And she was very dedicated to him. He was having an affair with her right around the time when the murders were happening. And it was her car that he got busted in. it tells you, here's his wife go, he's got a wife at home and he's killing prostitutes, and meanwhile he's got a girlfriend. He's leading a triple life over here. We're not leading a double life here. We're leading a triple life here.
In regards to your father, after he murdered prostitutes as well as June and staying with her body, did he tell you why he did that? Do you think that stemmed from his childhood?
Yes.
Affection, the dysfunctional affection, I guess you could call it?
Yeah, I think so. Because like I said, one prostitute bit him. He was unable to perform, so he figured, oral sex. And, it didn't happen. And the girl laughed at him. The girl was laughing at him, like, limp dick, and he choked her. I don't think he had the intent of killing her, but because of the fact that she laughed at him. But then I asked him, I said, but all those times when you was a kid, everybody laughed at you, and then you were growing up, and more people laughed at you. How come you didn't kill them? It didn't make sense. It didn't make sense. I said, he said, because I was vulnerable, I was weak. It's only when I went into the service, when I experienced my first killings and stuff like that, that he was able to perform that kind of a thing, to kill somebody, to take a life. All those things that he harbored inside of him kind of like erupted, when the girl bit him. And, like I said, I kind of think that maybe his aunt or his mother or sister kind of bit him at one point when they were performing oral sex on him, that it kind of triggered something in him. Those are the things that like in the back of my mind. If you kick somebody's ass out of the car, if somebody's going to bite your dick, you're going to keep him in the car? I don't think so. You're going to kick him out of the car. Common sense. I don't care who you are. If somebody bit me, I'm going to kick him out of the car. I don't want that. I don't want that shit in my car. You bit me. Go ahead, bite me again. You'd like, unless you're a sadistic, unless you're into that kind of like, S&M kind of thing. But I don't know. But he snapped the neck. He choked her. As far as eviscerating her, I don't think he had a chance to I think he was more angry than anything. He sat with her in his car, and he was like berating her. Why'd you do this? Why'd you do this? And, she wasn't answering back, so after a while he got fed up, and then he dumped the body, so there was no harm, no foul there. But she bit him, I'm surprised his wife didn't know. That's his wife, unless he wasn't having sex with her, or his girlfriend for that matter. Did she see that there was any bite marks on his genitalia? No. Nobody really asked any questions to him. Nobody said, why'd you get, why is there a bite mark there? No, he could have easily said, if him and Clara were doing something, he could have easily said, oh, Rose did it. And then, if anything, he could have said, oh, I was messing around, it was my zipper. Those kind of things. It wouldn't have been state the obvious.
Besides June Cicera, I believe is how you say her name, did he talk about any of the other victims besides her?
Not really. He just said he had a sense of relief when he killed him. It was like taking care of business. That's what he used to say to me a lot. It was taking care of business. And I said, what do you mean by that? Like ridding crime off the streets. These prostitutes didn't commit any crime besides soliciting. That's not really a major crime. Prostitutes an old, the oldest profession in the world. And he said, no, it wasn't that. It was just like, it was like a vindication for him because he was getting back at his mother, his aunt, and his sister. That's a really weird way of, putting closure to things. You don't go and take a life. To be honest with you, I feel more empathy for the victims' families. I'm pretty sure, like I said, I've been approached over the years about, making contact with them, sitting down with an interview. But I don't think I would want to do that on blast. I wouldn't want to go on like that. If I was going to meet the victims' families, I would want them to meet me one-on-one, off camera, off record, privately. And if whether or not they want to do an interview, that's up to them. But I'm not going to push them. I'm not going to pursue them to do that. That's why most of the interviews basically went south. That's why I don't get where serial killer daughters, that they see on A&E or on ID Discovery. I really can't get with those women. I really can't. I have no connection to them whatsoever because their fathers committed crimes. They killed women. They killed whoever. And it's like, to them, it's like, oh, I didn't know anything. I knew after the fact. I knew all that, and I kind of like kept it in, and I was like, what do I do? How do I release this? I went to church. I went to confession. I spoke to my professors at college and stuff like that. But I never would, I would want to, this is before Facebook, I would have wanted to like reach out to the families and speak to them. Whether or not they had a harsh criticism about me, about him, that's neither here nor there. But I wanted to know that I made contact with them because, like I said, I wanted to say sorry to them, even though I didn't do anything. I always felt responsible for that, of knowing what he did. That's a pretty big cross to bear. That really is. when he was like unveiling himself to, telling me about his crimes and stuff. At first I was like, can I listen to this? Should I listen to this? Then I said, you know what, I got to go for this, because like I said, if he was going to unburden anything, then he might as well unburden it to me, instead of somebody else. Because when any kind of psychiatrist came up there, any kind of psychologist or college student, he would play with them. He would play with them. Well, you want to interview me about my crimes and everything? He would play with them. He would bullshit to them. He would lie to them and da-da-da, and go fuck yourself and whatever. And that was but that was his entertainment. That was his entertainment, by playing with these people. Me, you couldn't play with.
Right, almost like Hannibal Lecter and...
Yeah. Yes, in a way, and it was like kind of surreal, because when I used to go up to Sullivan to see him, the guards would call me Clarice. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe, it was an inside joke. It was a very dark joke, but, I laughed with them because, it was funny at the time. But, as far as them saying it in public to me, you're Clarice. I was like, yeah, whatever. Okay, you want to label me that? Okay, fine. But, he never, he told me it. Was there a fear of him coming out and getting me or my kids? No, I don't think he would ever hurt me or my kids or my family in any which way. He was more concerned with the fact that if anything happened to him and he died, that basically every nut job would come out of the woodwork, which they did. I must get 2 or 3 death threats a week on Facebook, and I block, delete. I have to deal with a big following fan base out there, some good, some bad. One guy wanted me to send him his ashes so he can inject it because he was a heroin addict. You want to talk about a whack job? That's a whack job. And then he didn't want to inject it in the most conventional way. He wrote me about where he wanted to put the ashes, like he wanted to inject in his dick. Come on, who does that?
Yeah, so that's weird even by my standards.
It is. That's a whack job. I can understand snorting the ashes like, Keith Richards did with his father, but I wasn't about to do something like that. When he had passed away, it was a very cloak and dagger. His ashes had to get circulated from funeral home to funeral home because everybody was out to get these ashes or get his body because they couldn't bury him in a conventional way. Even the Veterans Administration said, we can't bury him. We're going to have to cremate him. I said, okay. And I have his ashes to this day. A lot of people ask me, would you like to sell them? How can you do that? Seriously, that's my father. He was a human being. He was somebody's child. That's that's no better than him killing prostitutes because that's me prostituting him by selling his ashes. People offered me big mucho bucks, but I wouldn't do it. I couldn't. There was no way I could do something like that. He used to have this joke all the time saying, oh, you're going to bring me home one day, right? And I said, yeah, Dad, I was spending 250 years. I said, yeah, Dad, I am. And sure enough, when he passed away, guess what? He came in the mail. They mailed him to me, and and the postman didn't even know that he had his ashes. And I said, what you got right there? He dropped it. I grabbed it in midstream before it hit the floor. I said, you got a body in there. He was like, what? This guy was freaking out. A Brooklyn mailman's going like, what the hell? What the fuck are they mailing in the thing nowadays?
Right. Let alone Arthur Shawcross. I'm sure.
Yeah, let alone Arthur. Yeah, exactly. It was weird. It was very surreal. But he came home right before Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving came, and guess what? He was at the head of the table, and guess who was sitting at the head of the table along with my husband? Him. And I said, Dad, you're home. You made it home. And my kids kind of look like mommy's losing her mind here, mommy's losing her mind here. There's a box of ashes on our table at Thanksgiving, and she's talking to it. But, they kind of understood after a while. And they didn't understand fully about him. But years later on, as I grew up and they got older and they got to understand, I was able to basically reveal to them a lot about him. And, some of them took it with a grain of salt, and some of them were shocked. But they weren't ashamed by it. They were not ashamed by it, knowing him that he was a grandfather. So, out of respect for him, they kind of kept it. They didn't advertise it. Let's put it that way. They didn't go around saying, oh, my grandfather's a serial killer. I'm going to fuck with you. No, they didn't do that. They were very, very quiet, very discreet about it. I didn't go on blast, because if you notice, the interview I did with the British interview, that was his last interview. That was the only interview I gave. And then after that, Dr. Phil came 10 years later. And I basically said, I think it's time for me to start talking and stuff like that. So I did.
Up until your father's death in 2008, from the time you initiated contact with him, did he act like a father figure to you? Did he show traits that a father would? Could you tell that he was genuinely caring, emotional, or?
No, that was a gradual thing because, and that's like a big shock. Like if just say you had a kid and, the kid is 10 years old and you find out about it. I mean, you're not going to warm up to the kid right away. It's going to take some time for you to get to bond and all that. It took us a good 2 or 3 years to bond before it ever came to affection and stuff like that. I mean, you shake hands, you hug, and that's about it. But when it came to like real feelings, like my husband had an accident. He fell off a 3-story roof and he was in a coma for 47 days. I had wrote to my father. I said, I won't be able to come visit you because my husband's in a coma, and he almost died and stuff like that. That's when the empathetic Arthur came out. The father came out. Anything I can do. I was getting money. He was sending me money that he didn't even have. He was sending me money for the kids. And I was like, Dad, you don't have to send me any money. Oh, I want to take care of you. He's in the hospital, and how are you holding up? That was his thing. And, a couple of his friends that lived in Las Vegas called me up. He had called them, and they called me, and they said, if there's anything you need, let us know. We'll send you a money order, whatever. And I got like a $500 money order one day, and I was shocked. I didn't even know these people. I wanted to pay them back and stuff like that. I didn't want to take the money to begin with. But at the time, my husband was out of work. He was in a coma. There was no money coming in. I had to pay rent. I had to feed my kids. So, it was really a tough time. But he basically, he wrote every single day. He wrote every single day. And, I would get calls from his friends in Vegas like every other week. Is there anything you need? Wants to send you anything, stuff like that. And he was deeply concerned. He was like climbing the walls in there because he was in there. I was out here. He couldn't offer me a shoulder to cry on. When my husband finally got back on his feet again, and, he was stabilized and he was able to go back to work. Eventually, I was able to resume our prison interviews and stuff like that, interviews and whatever. Because, he didn't call them visit, he called them interviews, because the fact that I wasn't grilling him or anything like that, but he kind of felt it was like an interview, that whatever question I had for him, he kind of felt like he was under the gun to answer it. So I was like, if you're uncomfortable, we don't have to talk about it. We'll talk about something else. And, when you basically get him off the sidetrack, he would go right back to the original conversation, which made him feel a little bit more comfortable, at ease. He can basically open up a little more. So I'll be talking mundane things about the kids and, life and stuff like that, school. And, he would gradually like segue back into the, well, I feel like I want to tell you something about this, that, and the other thing. And I said, okay, maybe that was his way of venting, but like I said, he showed like a fatherly concern when my husband was in the hospital. He did.
So you've talked about your children, which are his grandchildren, being able to visit with him. What was that like? Were any of them creeped out? Did they know what he did prior to going in there? Did they hang on to you the whole time?
My two oldest children went because they were at teenage years at that time. So they were able to. My daughter was like, she was like kind of quiet about it, but she was fascinated about it, because at the time, she was going through a dark phase herself, and my son was more of, connecting with him, bonding with him as a grandfather. And, at first he was very scared, because we walked into the prison and, when the big doors slammed, he jumped, he was scared. He says, Mommy, I'll never be bad. I'll never do anything wrong. That scared the life out of him. So when he met Arthur, they were talking like regular grandfather, grandson kind of thing. Are you playing sports? Do you go fishing? Do you like this? Do you like that? So my son basically expressed that he wanted to go into the military when he was old enough. So what do you want to do? I want to join the Marines. So he says, well, so he says, well, I kind of have a question for you. And this is like the first visit he had with him. I have a question for you. He says, what does human flesh taste like? So he looked at my son, he looked at me, and I was like, like, gonna tell him or not, So he says, well, you know what roast pork tastes like? He said, yeah. He said, we get it from the Chinese restaurant all the time. He says, well, that's what human flesh tastes like. He never ate it again.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, and he was like, he didn't go into the military. And he never ate roast pork again. Let's put it that way. That left a dent in his head forever. He never had any nightmares from it. My daughter never had nightmares from it. My daughter used to write to him. My son would write to him on occasion. But otherwise than that, they went to visit him one time.
So that was the first and last visit that your children went to see him?
Yep.
Was it that one conversation that did they not want to go back and see him because of that?
In a way, yes, because he was like really uncomfortable with the fact that, the kids were there. And we discussed it, that he said, I don't think you should bring the kids up here because I don't think this is a place for them to be. And I don't want them to think, bad of me because I'm in here and stuff like that. It's bad enough the crimes I committed. Right. They only understand about it.
It's kind of hard there.
Yeah. So it was like that one visit, and that was it. That one visit. I mean, people have this disproportionate, perception that I would take my kids up all the time.
Right.
No, that's not the case. I went up there solo. I sat with him. I spoke to him. We cried. We bonded. We this, we that, and I never brought my kids past that point. In the beginning, I mean, this was like 2 years in. I didn't bring my kids right away. I brought the kids in gradually. Because I didn't want, and I brought them separately. Because on the way back home, they're going to have questions, and you're not going to be inundated with 2 kids in the air like, Mommy, why this? Why? I'd rather bring them separately. That way, we come out of the prison and we got back on the bus again, then we were able to talk about it, at length. Like, how did you feel? What do you think? And this and that. Well, considering what he did, I don't approve what he did. Obviously, he killed kids. Obviously, he killed women. It's wrong to kill. But I can't hate him. I want to get to know him. And, maybe he can offer me advice or something like that along the lines and stuff like that. Because at that time, they needed that structure. They needed that connection with him. As a grandfather, they wanted to, get some grandfatherly advice. And like I said, he wrote to them, and he was very, my son smarted off me one day. And I wrote it in a letter. I said, my son smarted off to me. He said, I know kids are rebellious at a certain age. And he wrote my son a good letter. He said, don't you ever talk to your mother like that again. And if I was out there and, this and this and this, I would kick you in the ass or whatever. You don't talk to your mother like that. You have respect for her. And then it was kind of weird because, I had totally forgotten what he did. And he just came and apologized. So I said, what did Grandpa write? I'm sorry, Ma. Kind of scared him. He was like, he's going to kick my ass.
Well, that's understandable.
What's he going to do? Bring me up to prison and he's going to kick my ass? I wasn't going to do that, really. But he had it in his head. He was going to, you're going to let him out for one day and kick. He was young. He's going to come out and kick my ass and then go back to prison. I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that. It was weird.
Up until he passed away, what was your relationship with him like?
Very spiritual at that time because the last visit I had with him, the prison priest came over. And he was African, and he came over. He said, "Oh, why don't you ever come to church services?" He would set up a church service, but he would never attend. And he says, he goes, Margaret, he called me Margaret. Margaret, talk to your father about coming to church and everything. Come and have a conversation with me, right? And my father was like, yeah, whatever. I'll set up. I'll see you on Sunday, Father. Yeah. And kind of dismissed him, walked away. So, Father gave me a pat on the back, and I'll talk to you later. And I said, and I looked at my father and said, Dad, maybe you should consider going to church. Maybe it might be good for you. So that Sunday, after that visit, he went to church. And he spoke to when he was setting up, setting up the chairs and everything, he was telling the priest, he said, well, I like to sit in, and I like to listen in, I like to observe. So from that observation, he went back again. And then again and again and again. And then he went to confession for the first time. And he kind of unburdened things. And, I could never get from the priest because, once you get into the confessional seal, they can never tell you anything. So whatever he spoke to the priest about kind of opened his eyes a little bit. And he started writing very metaphorically, very religiously in all of his letters now from then on. So I was like, maybe, something happened. Something must have happened between the visit and him talking to the priest that something transformed in him. Then I got a letter from him of conversion. I'm going to become a Catholic. I'm going to have my ceremony. I'm going to get baptized in the Catholic faith. I'm going to return to God and everything. He kind of made his peace. He kind of made his peace with everything, his past, his present, everything he made his peace with. And when he died, the prison chaplain came up and knocked on my door at 12 o'clock at night. And, he knocked on the arm from Sullivan Correctional, and my husband's like, what'd you do now? Looking at me, what did I do now? There's a guy standing in my doorway, let him in. And we were talking till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning till this guy left. We were, I didn't cry right away. It was a shock to me that he had died suddenly. But he had a week to go before he was able to be baptized in the faith. But they said a prayer over him, they blessed him and stuff like that. So he was able to, he had rosaries in his hand when he passed away, and they sent him off and they had him cremated. So there was a part of God in him. There really was. So I kind of feel responsible for the fact that I kind of nudged him in that direction. And I thank God I did, because when I went to my parish priest and I told him about it, he said, you performed a miracle. It's 3 miracles he credited, you become a saint. So far I performed 2 miracles. I'm waiting for the 3rd. So if I get my wings and I fly out of here, don't be too surprised,
Right.
But that was a big transformation. The guy's a serial killer. And you kind of look back on the saints, and, Saint Therese, had this guy confess. She didn't have a chance to see him, but she wrote him a letter, and he confessed before he got guillotined. And that was a miracle, because he was able to confess, and he was able to, cleanse his sins. My father was the same way. He went to confession every week, and he unburdened himself to the priest. Whatever he confessed to me all those years ago, like I said, when a family member goes to jail, they do time. You also do time with that person as well, because you've got to go through the visits, and you have to go through the letter writing, you have to go through the drama, you have to go through all that pain and suffering about not being with that person. So yes, I technically did 8 years in Sullivan Correction with Arthur Shawcross, with my father. Yes, I did. Emotionally I did. Not mentally. Well, mentally, yes, but not physically. Every time I went in there, I felt like I was, hey, up in line, step in line, and stuff like that. I felt institutionalized, and it was very hard to turn off after those visits. It was very hard to turn off because, you just came out of a prison and you was in there for a couple of hours. And so, your mind is on a set like, oh, I'm in prison. You're doing time with your father. Like I said, weekly letters, daily letters and stuff like that. I was doing time with my father for 8 years. And that's why a lot of the times I will never do interviews, because of the fact that it was too painful to go through. It really was. It took a toll on my marriage. Thank God we're still married. We're going to be married 36 years this week. And my kids are intact, thank God. They never went to jail. None of them died. I raised my kids. The last of my children were twins, and they were 21 last month. I'm a grandmother to 5. And, I think I'm pretty much blessed when it comes to that. But I would still like to close out with the victims' families about my father. I feel I owe that to them, because obviously, there was a lot of anger directed towards him because he killed a family member. So, maybe I'm there to clean up loose ties or whatever like that, whether or not the family wants to meet me or not. That's purely up to them. I'm open to interpretation. I'm open to any kind of suggestion. They want to reach out to me, by all means. I will never shrug them off. I would never disrespect them. Because, because he killed them. He killed them. I didn't kill them. And that's what a lot of the misconception is. A lot of people say, well, your father killed him. You must be the same way. No, I'm not. I'm willing to make peace for him that he was unable to do. So if I can make peace, to close up any kind of gap or whatever, I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to put myself out there on blast in public, as much as I don't like it, in some odd way. I like to make the peace with them, and just to give them closure, give them peace that, their family members, were taken away brutally. Yes, absolutely. They were, disfigured, whatever, they were eviscerated. Yes. But I would like to put a little bit of closure on that, shut the anger down. I'm still going to get death threats. That's going to be constant. There's going to be whack jobs left, right, and center. I can't help that. I can't shut that down. I can just delete them and block them. That's about it. But, I'm basically where I live upstate New York, and my location is basically, private, So people in town know about me. I live in a small town, in upstate New York. And people saw the Dr. Phil interview. People saw the Netflix interview with a serial killer. People come up to me all the time. They come up to me all the time. Not nasty. They're very, very nice. And, what is it like? And naturally, everybody asks, what is it like to be a daughter of a serial killer? And to me, it's not an evasive question, and I don't brush people off. But if I get a bad vibe about it, I'll basically shut them down. I say, no, I'd rather not talk about it. Leave it at that. And they'll leave me alone. I can walk anywhere in this town and nobody won't bother me. They know who I am. They know who my background is. They know who my father is, my parentage. But they won't, they don't treat me any differently than the next door neighbor, Joe Blow from Buffalo. I'm me. That's it. I have no reflection about what my father did. They don't hate me. I have haters, of course. Everybody has haters. But you know what? it is what it is. You know, I have the bloodline. I have his blood in me. So what am I going to do about it? What am I going to get a blood transfusion? Not going to work.
I know you said you get death threats on Facebook and so on and so forth. But besides that, 12 years later, do you deal with any type of backlash, you know, on a daily or weekly basis other than, you know, the social media, you know, subtle threats?
No, none at all. None. I don't get any media coming after me. I don't have any, you know, A&E or ID Discovery coming after me anymore. You know, I live a pretty normal, reflective, solitary life, you know, with my kids and my husband and my grandkids. You know, we all live here together. And, you know, it's basically business as usual, as my father would say, but not business as usual as far as killing anybody. You know, I go about my business. You know, I'm retired now, and my husband's retired. You know, so nobody really comes after me. And, you know, my friends on Facebook know about me and my father, and they don't, you know, if you look at my following, I have a lot of following, you know. I mean, nobody hates me in that aspect, you know. I'm me. They don't look at him and say, well, it's your fault and this and this and this. I don't get blamed as far as that is concerned. You know, my friends know about me. Any questions they want, they'll go offline and they'll talk to me one-on-one. I'll be more than happy to ask any questions they want. You know, I mean, anything. I'm very open with my friends. I'm very, you know, positive with my friends. So I don't have any negativity as far as anything is concerned. I have a lot of students call me, you know, and they call me on Facebook phone. You know, I like to write a paper about serial killers. You know, you know, those ones are the fumbling ones that they are. They really don't know anything from their ass to their elbow, but you know, you don't want to play with them. My father would have played with them, not me.
They want to get in the mind of a serial killer, but as I always tell people, you're not going to get in their mind. They're going to get into your mind, and they're going to fuck you to the point of no return.
They'll fuck you without Vaseline. Let's put it that way. They'll fuck you without Vaseline, and you know, it's going to leave them like blithering in like idiots. Like, oh, what the hell happened to me? Then they want to become, you know, they want to dabble in serial killer. You know, they have that impulsivity of wanting to become a serial killer but don't have the balls to do it, you know, right. Which is weird, you know. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, back then, you know, my father didn't have that kind of influence with, you know, they had serial killers back in the day, but it was like very far and in between, you know, like Ed Gein and all that. And I'm pretty sure he must have read about people like that, but he didn't idolize them. He didn't like try to copy them. He was motivated by whatever he was motivated by. You know, it was basically his past. He was motivated by his past, and anything that happened to him, he kind of like shot it out by taking it out on poor innocent people, kids for that matter. You know, that's the way he was. He was never motivated by anything else. He was just motivated by his past. You know, that old scenario, my mother made me do it. You know, it was my mother's fault. David Berkowitz, for instance, it's my mother. That's why I killed these women. They rejected me. Same thing with Arthur. Berkowitz and my father were friends. I met Berkowitz. I sat down with I had coffee with Berkowitz. You know, I mean, those are the type of people you see in there, those super lifers, you know. I mean, you sit down, he introduced me to him, and, you know, David started writing to me. I started writing to him. David sent me his book. Then Arthur found out, what are you doing with my daughter? You know, that kind of thing. And he was almost shitting his pants, you know. And David is basically protected under the veil of religion, so to speak, because if you talk to David Berkowitz, in 2-minute conversation, he must talk about God 30,000 times. Well, if you start getting that little sour taste in your mouth, like, God, you know, can we talk about something else now? You know, really? God this, God that. Okay, God is great. Great, I get it. But can we talk about something else now? You know, like, how's your day? You know, what'd you do today? And stuff like that. You know, want to get back to the reality over here. Him and Arthur had a give and take. You know, he would tease him, and Arthur, you know, and you know, David Berkowitz would banter with him and stuff like that. To meet Berkowitz for the first time, I was shocked. Because he was like,
I can only imagine.
Yeah, what do you mean, my friend David over here? And he walked over, and I was like, holy shit. You know, I was like, oh, my God, I don't believe this. And I try not to be obvious about it. And I didn't want to be obvious about it. But, you know, my father introduced me to him, and he sat down with us. We had coffee together. You know, we were talking back and forth. It was like regular conversation, like you do in a park, or somebody come visit you in a house. You know, but you're in a prison, you know. And he was a very nice man, you know. And like I said, he would write to me, would send me all these little, you know, religious tracts. And then when he wrote his book, he sent me a copy. And then my father found out about it. And it was hysterical, because he was like kind of pulling his leg, like, what are you doing talking to my daughter? You know, I know how you are with women, you know, I mean, things like that, you know. And he would like shit his pants. This guy's got to like run in the opposite, scuttle like a roach, like scuttle in the opposite direction. But my father had fun with him, you know. And like I said, he was very nice to me, very polite, you know. And I met a lot of other people in prison that he was friends with. They were very polite to me, very cordial, you know. So you can't, you know, just because they're in there doesn't mean you can't treat them like a human being, right? You know, they're human beings. That's what I think about people. I look at people regardless of what they did, how fucked up they did things. There's somebody's child. There's somebody's child, mother's child, father's child, somebody's brother, somebody's sister, things like that. I kind of look at it that way because I'm somebody's child. I'm his child. So.
Right. Yeah, most definitely. And, it's hard for people to distinguish that sometimes. And it's fair in a sense, but at the same time, unless you're like in your shoes, you wouldn't really understand it. But if you were in somebody else's shoes, say the victim's shoes, you'd be like, oh no, that's ridiculous. That's stupid, but.
Mm-hmm. It's very one-sided. And that's the sad part about it is you could never, there's no meeting of the minds when it comes to that because a lot of emotions, a lot of, come into play, like a lot of anger. A lot of anger comes from the victims' families, and I can understand why. I can empathize with that. Believe me, I can empathize with that. I would like to sit with them. I like to cry with them. I would like for them to unburden. I would like to unburden to them, and stuff like that. But, until they reach out to me, I won't make an attempt to reach out to them because I feel that I have to respect their space. I do have to do that. Whether or not they want to sit and talk to me, if some interviewer comes down, would you like to meet her? I'd be more than happy to meet you. Be more than that, but off the record. At first, I would like to meet you off the record at first, without no cameras, without no recording. I want to meet you one-to-one, sit down, have a cup of coffee, whatever. I would rather do it that way, and then if you want to go forward with an interview, I'll be more than happy to, if you want to. I won't push anybody. I will not pursue them. I would never, manipulate them in any which way because, like I said, most of these serial killers' daughters, I really can't stand. I can't stomach them, to be honest with you. And anybody to lock me with them, I find that a very big disrespect. That is a very, very big disrespect to me that they would lock me in with these other women that are serial killers' daughters. Whatever they went through, they went through. I went through what I went through. And I don't put it on blast. I would never. It's like grinding their faces into it. The victims' families, grinding it into their faces about telling about the killings and stuff like that. I mean, they'd suffered enough. You're gonna twist the knife a little bit further? I mean, come on, really. Really, I mean, if anything, I'm very empathetic about people's feelings. I really am, and it hurts me that they're hurt. That's what hurts. I mean, I have to live with that pain every single day. That they hurt, and they're gonna hurt more than me because I never lost a child. God bless me. But the fact of the matter is, they did, and he took their life away. And like I said, in some strange, kind of twisted way, I kind of feel responsible for each one that he did. I really do. Any kind of peace with them, not because of his sake, but the fact of the matter is, just make peace. Just make peace. Enough is enough already. I can't put up with the death threats. I can't. The death threats they don't bother me. I'm from Brooklyn. I don't take shit from nobody. You know what I'm saying? You want to threaten me? Go ahead. Here's my address. Go ahead and you want to knock me out? You want to shoot me? Go right ahead. People done worse to me. Whatever you think you can do to me, it's already been done already. Whatever you think that you can do to hurt me, it's already been done. You cannot hurt me anymore. I'm a confident woman. I'm a stable woman. Bring it all you got. Bring it all you got. I don't care. When I confront the person, I go in one deep. I don't bring 30 people with me. I go in one deep. Me and you, toe to toe. We're either gonna slug it out.
Like a one-man gang. Nobody wants smoke with the daughter of Arthur Shawcross.
Oh well, no, I don't think so. I mean, I wouldn't bite them or anything like that. I mean, that would be very, very, very poor taste, Right. But yeah, I get a lot of kidding around like, oh, Hannibal Lecter's daughter, and this and this and this, and I get all of that. Believe me. Clarice is like really played out right now. They better think of something else, really. I get that all the time. Like, how you doing, Clarice? Oh, fuck me, really. Next.
And I really appreciate you talking to me. I've always wanted to speak to somebody close to Arthur Shawcross because when he passed away, I was 17 or something like that, and I've always wanted to speak to him. So I'm 29 now.
You're the same age as my son. Oh, okay, all right. Anytime, sweetheart. Take it easy.
That was my interview with Maggie Deming, the daughter of Arthur Shawcross. Go ahead and check out my Patreon, patreon.com/unforbiddentruth. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you on the next one.